Good evening. The March 20th, 2024 regular meeting of the Planning Commission will come to order at 6:33 p.m. Please rise and follow Commissioner Saikali in our Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand and salute the flag. Put your hand over your heart. Let's begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I have our Planning Secretary, Rhea, please call roll.
Commissioner Lujan,
Here.
Commissioner Sakali,
Present.
Commissioner Morales,
Here.
Vice Chair Guerra,
Here.
Chair Uva.
Present. This is the time set aside for oral communications from the Planning Commission. Does any commissioner wish to make an announcement, report on a conference, meeting, or request items for a future agenda? Commissioner Morales.
None tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Saikali.
None.
Commissioner Lujan.
None.
Vice Chair Guerra. And none for me. Presentations. We have none today, correct? Does the Community Development Director have a report on a City Council action or other general updates?
I do, Chair Uva, 2 updates related to last council's meeting. There was 2 land use related items that will be coming forward to the Planning Commission in the next few months. One relates, actually, I'm sorry, there's 2 items of discussion. One will be coming back to the Planning Commission. The item is related to tobacco shop regulations. The City Council discussed potential options for regulating tobacco retailers in the city, citywide, and has directed staff to prepare an ordinance for consideration by the Planning Commission that would set potentially a buffer zone from one tobacco retailer to another, and also to specific sensitive uses such as schools and parks. So staff will be researching that, has already started on that in preparation for the council item for discussion. And per council's direction, we will be bringing that draft ordinance for the Planning Commission's review and consideration. Along with that item, staff is also preparing other code amendments related to the zoning code that are focusing on clarifying any outdated items that are not complying with state law, other items that have been brought forward by community members as confusing or not up to date with what's happening in the land use world or the market trends. We have probably over a dozen other zoning codes that staff is looking at, so we will bring that along with the other tobacco item, where we plan to kind of package them together. And then the other item that was discussed by the City Council relates to the regulation of alcohol uses in the downtown Downey specific plan and the Downey Landing specific plan. Staff also took various options to the City Council for a discussion on potentially regulating alcohol uses that are in conjunction with eating establishments, one option being requiring a conditional use permit. The city staff also highlighted to the City Council that any eating establishments that have alcohol that also have live entertainment, the actual live entertainment use is required to obtain a conditional use permit that comes before the Planning Commission. And after lots of discussion and deliberation by the City Council decided to not move forward with any options presented to them last week, but they are considering staff's efforts to provide additional security measures from a security standpoint, private security that we've already done in the downtown Downey area, and also additional police foot patrols that we have over the weekends. And also for this coming City Council agenda item, I believe there's also an item coming forward from the police department that discusses additional security measures for downtown. So considering all those options, City Council decided not to move forward at this time for any additional land use regulation related to alcohol in conjunction with eating establishments. And that concludes my report for tonight. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Public hearings, we have none today. So now we move on to non-agenda public comment. Persons wishing to address the Planning Commission on city business not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Persons wishing to address the Planning Commission on any item listed on the agenda, such as consent calendar or other business, may do so at this time. It is requested, but not required, that you state your name, your address, and subject matter upon which you wish to speak. Please limit your comments to no more than 4 minutes. Pursuant to the Brown Act, no discussion or action other than a brief response, referral to the Planning Commission staff, or schedule for a subsequent agenda shall be taken by the Planning Commission on any issue brought forth that is not listed on the agenda.
Hi, good evening, esteemed members of the Planning Commission and fellow citizens of Downey. My name is Marlon Ramirez, Assistant to the City Manager for the City of Downey. The City of Downey would like to invite you to be part of shaping the future of Downey. The Downey 2030 Strategic Plan is a roadmap for the city's future, but for it to truly reflect the aspirations and needs of Downey's diverse community, we need your voices. We encourage each and every one of you to take a minute of your time to visit the city's website, downeyca.org/Downey2030SP, or the city's social media platforms at Downey, at City of Downey CA, and participate in the questionnaire, which is designed to capture your invaluable insights. If it's easier for you to fill out the questionnaire in person, the city will have a booth at the Art Walk this Saturday, at the Night Market on Thursday, the 28th from 5 to 9, and at the Bunny Patch at Golden Park on March 30th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. This questionnaire isn't a formality, it's a direct channel for the public to express its vision, concerns, and ideas for the future of Downey. Whether you're a longtime resident, a business owner, a student, or a newcomer to the City of Downey, your perspective matters. By sharing your thoughts, you're contributing to a collective vision that will guide city decisions and actions for the next 5 years. The questionnaire is open until the end of March. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Well, that was about as left-wing bias, AI-generated speech you could ask for. The diversity of Downey, our diverse community. Get rid of the word diverse. We are one America First community. You come here as an immigrant, you assimilate into American society. It says so right on your oath of allegiance. You leave all your other inferior culture behind. You adopt the American culture, free speech, gun rights, no illegal search and seizures, things like that. That's why people come here. So let's not worry about our collective. Those are another little buzzword you'll get from your left-wing socialists. Let's get rid of that stuff. We can come together as individuals. We are individuals before God, not a group. We're not categorized by the progressives who put you in their convenient little box. You Latinas over here, you black people over here, you white people over here. No, you're an individual. Everybody's different, and that's okay. Okay? Rezoning, or changing the zoning codes. I just want to say that building without adequate parking is a failed policy, and it is failing now. Look at Los Angeles, completely failing. But they're going to change the codes so they can have more building for the developers without parking. That's what it's all about, and it's going to collapse. It is collapsing now. Another thing too, planning commission permits should not be approved or rejected on the aspect of ESG policy. And for your information, the state of Texas has pulled $8.5 billion now from the investment company BlackRock because of their ESG insanity. And we should never allow any ESG codes here into Downey at all. That is nothing but globalist tyranny. We want America first, American freedom, American ingenuity. And we want to be left alone and take the restrictions off of businesses and let them expand. But our housing, we need adequate parking. Otherwise, we just end up with nowhere to park, nowhere to go. You have to park maybe a mile away to go visit a friend because there's nowhere to park. So just so we don't need to cater to the developers and put money in our own pocket, especially the real estate people. Again, Texas pulls $8.5 billion of investment money from BlackRock because of the ESG insanity. Make sure Downey does the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to come up? Okay, so we can close the non-agenda public comment. Item number 9 on our agenda is the consent calendar. Approval of the 2023 General Plan and Housing Element Annual Progress Report. Items in this section will be acted in one motion unless a commissioner requests a separate action. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments of any consent calendar item? Anyone?
None for me.
Okay. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar?
Motion.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. May we have a vote?
Motion passes.
Okay. Item number 10 on our agenda is review of the Ralph M. Brown Act and meeting procedures. So it looks like our city attorney is going to be doing this presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. Among my roles here at the city is to advise on matters pertaining to the Brown Act and compliance with the same. And in doing so, we, from time to time, offer training to our boards and commissioners, just so they have an overview of the Brown Act and what it generally requires. As an aside, I'm always available for specific questions, whether that be tonight or at any time you may have them. But this is intended to give you, for some of you, perhaps a refresher who are continuing your service on the commission. And for your new commissioners, it may introduce you to some of the main tenets of the Brown Act. And so without further ado, I'll get into it. And like I said, if you have any questions, my style is fairly easy. And I invite any questions, midstream if you like. There's no need to wait. So please feel free to let me know if you have them.
Mr. City Attorney, I got a question.
Yes.
Is this, I think this might be officially your very first presentation to the Planning Commission as City Attorney. Because I've been here, I was here right before you got here, and I don't remember you being on that side.
Yes, Vice Chair Guerra, I think that is correct. And so ordinarily I'm seated elsewhere, but it's certainly my pleasure and privilege to present on this topic tonight. And again, it's one of my roles here at the city that I do train and consult on a regular basis. So, okay. Move this along here. All right. So I thought I'd start off with a brief history of the Planning Commission. Some of your continuing commissioners may know of this, but as you may know, the Planning Commission itself was established by our municipal code, meaning that it is enshrined in our code, which I think is an addition of its importance, if you will. It is part of our city's systems of boards and commissions established by the charter, which is our foundational document. I like to refer to it as our constitution, if you will, the charter. This system of boards and commissions provides a way for residents who have special experience or interest to participate in the city's decision-making process by advising the council on certain, often specialized issues. So, for example, I know some of you on the dais have land use experience and other related experience, and this is a way, for you to bring to bear your expertise on decisions before the city and to share that insights, with the city council as well. The membership of the commission, 5 commissioners. 1 is appointed by each council member, and the appointment, removal, and the terms of service are all governed by our city charter in section 902 specifically. The powers and duties of the planning commission are actually outlined in the charter as well. I've listed a few of them here: review of the general and specific plans, project approval, zoning code amendments and ordinances. Our director tonight had explained just a few moments ago that certain code amendments would be reaching you for consideration and recommendation for approval to the city council. That is among the planning commission's more foremost roles, is to review and consider any ordinances or matters that pertain to land use. Typically, all such ordinances come before the planning commission before they go to the city council. And your role in reviewing those and passing upon them is to make a recommendation to the city council as to whether that ordinance or that land use regulation in question should be adopted by the council and thereby become the law of the city. But it is first subjected to planning commission review. And that is really for any matter, for any land use ordinance or land use regulation, that does always go before the planning commission first. A couple of other of your mainstay responsibilities are approving conditional use permits and variances. Any action that you take is generally considered final unless it's appealed within 15 calendar days, and all actions by the planning commission are reviewable by the city council within that time frame, or provided that a notice of appeal is filed within that time frame. The council, you may be aware, could also quote unquote call up a matter for review on its own under the Downey Municipal Code. So in other words, appeals can reach you in 2 different ways. The affected body or a third party can appeal the matter to the city council, or the city council under certain circumstances can itself call up the matter for review. And that outline, or that procedure is outlined in our code. Here I've just listed what I think are just a few of the attributes of an effective commissioner: balanced, level-headed, practical, open-minded to new ideas, commitment to making the process fair for all, having no conflict of interest, the ability to see strengths and weaknesses of proposals, and faith in our community. This and more describes all of you, I know. In terms of your relationship with staff, staff works with the commission very closely, as you know, Irma in particular and her team. But the staff is accountable to the city manager, technically speaking. And so while the staff is ready and willing and available to work with you and provide you any information you may need in your deliberation on land use matters, it generally is not the commission's purview to direct the staff's work either, as they are reportable to, or they report to the city manager. If you do have something, a recommendation that you wish to share, you're always free to do that with your council member who appointed you, or the commission itself can make a recommendation to the city council. Briefings by staff are certainly permissible, though those can have some Brown Act implications that we'll discuss later on. But I know that the staff and Irma meets with you on a one-on-one basis when appropriate to share information and brief you on matters that are headed to the council or headed to the commission. Here I've just outlined the process for consideration of business matters. When I say business matters, I typically mean those that are for which a public hearing is required. We don't have any public hearings tonight, but if we did, this is the process it usually follows. The chair announces the agenda item and states the subject matter. The commission then hears a presentation of staff on the item, asks any questions of staff that it may have. The public hearing, then it gets opened and the applicant himself or herself makes the presentation. Public comment is taken as well, and then the public hearing is closed, and then it's time for deliberation by the commission. And after that deliberation, the chair typically will invite a motion. As you all know, a motion is a request of the body that the body take a certain action on an item. If that motion receives a second, it will then proceed to have a vote before the full planning commission. And if it's a majority of the commissioners vote for that, it will carry. Incidentally, if any motion or request that's on the floor meets with a tie vote, that does not carry. For example, if there were a 2-2 vote, that matter would not carry, or would not be approved. And just, as a matter of decorum, typically only one person speaks at a time. The chair is usually the presider of the meeting, and she is in charge of recognizing folks for their time to speak on certain matters. When the chair calls for a vote, that's when you push your buttons that are in front of you, and then the result is displayed on the screen, and the chair can announce it as well. But again, a motion carries by an affirmative vote of more than 1/2 of the members, otherwise 3. The consent calendar, which we had tonight, all items listed under the consent calendar are typically moved or enacted by a single motion without discussion. Consent calendar items are typically matters that don't call for extended discussion. For example, where there is no public hearing, more routine matters, matters that may be moved without extensive deliberation or conversation or questioning by the commission. And those matters are typically moved in bulk or in summary format. And so one motion suffices to carry them all, just as we had tonight with our consent calendar item. Now, the consent calendar often consists of more than one item. Tonight, it just had one item, but it can have as many items as necessary. If any of the commissioners ever wish to discuss an item on the consent calendar, he or she can always what is called pull an item, and that item can be pulled for discussion by the commission. So just because it is on the consent calendar doesn't necessarily mean it has to be moved or forwarded or passed upon without any deliberation by the commission. And that's always in any commissioner's purview to do that. The consent calendar is ordinarily approved before we have any new business items. Motions on the floor can be amended. Typically, if one member makes a motion and there's what might often called a friendly amendment, another commissioner may suggest that. And if that member making the motion is agreeable to that amendment, the motion moves forward as amended. This is sometimes referred to as a substitute motion when the motion is amended. Not always, but it can sometimes bear that name. The bylaws of the Planning Commission. The bylaws are rules that govern your internal meeting conduct and procedures in general. For example, they address meeting times. We are here tonight on the third Wednesday of the month, at 6:30 p.m. But you'll find meeting times and other meeting protocols in the bylaws. They were most recently approved and updated in February of 2022. If you don't have a copy or if you need another copy, I'm sure that RIA can provide you those. But all our commissions and legislative bodies have bylaws, and those are really, you could think of them as internal housekeeping rules, if you will. Getting to the gist of the Brown Act. The Ralph M. Brown Act is a piece of legislation that is now over 70 some odd years old, and it really stands for the proposition that meetings are open and public, and really imposes a very high degree of transparency on public proceedings. It requires all local government business to be conducted in open, public, and notice meetings with very few exceptions. It applies to any governing body of a local agency, such as a city council, and any commission or committee or board that is created by formal action of the city council, like the Planning Commission. It does not apply to ad hoc committees that are created just for a very limited purpose and consist of anything less than a majority of a commission. So for example, if you were to create an ad hoc committee, that would ordinarily consist of 2 of you, and those meetings would not be governed by the Brown Act. But in general, any gathering of the commission where 3 or more members, that is a majority of the members, are present, that has potential to become a meeting under the Brown Act, whether it's taking place at the first and third Wednesdays of every month, or if it's in the lobby of City Hall, or if it's off-site, when there are at least 3 members present, that has potential to become a meeting. And I'll talk about that in a few seconds and some considerations to keep in mind. Essentially, the Brown Act is good public policy. California, like other states, has concluded there's more to be gained than lost in conducting public business in the open. Even if government behind closed doors is thought by some is more efficient, the perception is that it's unresponsive and untrustworthy in those circumstances. And therefore, transparency becomes the foundation of value under the Brown Act. I would add, as an aside, it's really a floor, not a ceiling, what the Brown Act requires. And so we can always exceed those requirements, but we can never fall below them. So what is a meeting? As I alluded to just a couple seconds ago, a meeting is any gathering of a majority of the members to hear or discuss any item of commission business or potential business. It requires notice, an agenda, and a period for public comment, all of which we've had tonight. And the staff is excellent in making sure all those bases are tagged and those procedural requirements are satisfied. Unless a majority gathering falls into one of the very few exceptions under the Brown Act, it's going to be considered a meeting. So does it consist of face-to-face gatherings only? The answer is no, in short. So meetings are not limited to face-to-face gatherings. That's what we think of them as. That's the most kind of quintessential definition of a meeting, or when a meeting occurs when we're all in the same room together. But with the advent of technology, as you might imagine, a meeting, at least how a meeting is defined under the Brown Act, can occur in some different ways. It includes any style of communications through, say, electronic means by which a majority of the members deliberate, takes action, or even discusses a piece of planning commission business outside of a notice meeting. So, for example, if 3 of you are having an email discussion on a matter of planning commission business or a potential matter of planning commission business, that becomes subject to the Brown Act. That's a subject of discussion that ordinarily would take place in front of the public, for the public to hear and provide their input on, and therefore the Brown Act strictly prohibits those types of discussions from going on behind the scenes, whether they take place electronically or in a face-to-face manner.
Can I clarify something? Because it's always, the public always thinks that when they see the city council together at an event or so forth. So tomorrow's our lunch for gangs out of Downey, okay? It'll be at the Rio Hondo. There'll be a lot of people, and I assume there'll be at least 3 commissioners there. So tomorrow when I go up to Ms. Uva and I said, hey, Mr. Funk did a great job last night in the presentation on the Brown Act and so forth. That's not a violation of the Brown Act because we're not voting on it, we're commenting after the fact. So that's so I just wanted to clarify that if I was accurate in that assessment.
That's correct, Vice Chair Guerra.
Yeah.
That would not be a violation of the Brown Act. And in general, I would just add that it is certainly permissible for a number of you or for all of you to attend a gathering like that, provided that no item of business is discussed. The example that you gave wouldn't necessarily, or I don't think it would fall into an item of business. You're just, making a comment on something that transpired. But I would carefully warn you that if a majority of you are gathered in any place, whether it be at a luncheon like tomorrow or anywhere, to avoid or to refrain from talking about any matter of commission business. But I don't think what you said would fall into that category.
We should not compliment Mr. Funk tomorrow.
No.
I'm going to go on the record now. He told us not to.
What? Also, I got a question too. So
Yes.
sometimes there's businesses that open up and they have like a soft opening and they invite usually council members, planning, just a way for that. When we attend those aren't as well. We're not discussing amongst each other any of the projects or anything. That's okay too, right? I mean,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
And
Again, those types of social, ceremonial, congratulatory type gatherings do not in and of themselves, make a meeting. But if a majority are present there and talk turns to commission business, that's when a meeting ensues. So. There are some exceptions to the Brown Act, and when the Brown Act doesn't apply. I think we just spoke of one that's, the one that is very, one of the main ones. Another one is what I'll call the individual contact exception, and that doesn't apply, between any individual contact between, you, a member, and any other person. Say a phone call with staff, or with a constituent, or with press. That is not something that's prohibited under the Brown Act, or more specifically, that results in a meeting under the Brown Act. But I will say as a caveat, individual contacts cannot be used to do in steps or stages what would be prohibited in one step. And that's where we get to the concept of a serial meeting. And the Brown Act expressly prohibits this concept of a serial meeting. And I put the language here directly from the statute here, but essentially a majority of the members can't use a series of steps directly or through intermediaries to discuss or deliberate or take action on an item of business that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. This is known as developing a collective concurrence. And the reason this is prohibited is because it deprives the public of the opportunity to observe and participate in your decision-making process. There's a couple different ways that this can happen. They become known as a daisy chain or a hub and spoke sequence. And in the daisy chain method, member A contacts member B contacts member C, until a quorum, a majority of the body, has discussed an item and taken action on it. In that regard, they've reached a collective concurrence by doing things in a piecemeal fashion, if you will, that they ordinarily would be doing collectively as one body in a public meeting. The other way that can happen is what's called the hub and spoke, when one council member or one commissioner contacts member B, contacts member C, contacts member D in a sequential manner and shares his or her ideas with all of those folks. So that at some point in time, a majority of you have reached, again, a collective concurrence, from this discussion that is being had in piecemeal fashion or in segments. To avoid these types of occurrences or to avoid that from happening, my recommendation, or I always believe the best way to avoid it, is to refrain from discussing agency business with anyone, or with a quorum at least, or really with anyone, or sharing your views with others outside of a public meeting. This is the time and place to discuss and deliberate commission business, and the safest way to avoid, or even the perception, that something or some decision-making process has gone on outside of this meeting, is just to avoid it. Again, you can consult with city staff outside of a meeting if you have questions. The Brown Act does not prohibit that. Sometimes I'm asked, well, does this mean that I can't call Irma with a question about an upcoming project? No, it does not mean that. You can certainly contact Irma and other staff members to the extent you need information, or you think you need information or have a question. The Brown Act does not prohibit you from doing that. And it does not consider that a meeting at which business is being discussed. But I would add that both staff and the commissioner should be very careful not to disclose the comments or the position of any other commissioner, because that's a way where you can learn how your colleagues might be feeling about a certain matter, and through subsequent discussions, again, develop some type of collective agreement on a subject outside of a meeting. Other exceptions to the Brown Act: what is not a meeting? Again, to hearken back to what we just spoke at, attendance at seminars, conferences open to the public and of general interest, community meetings that are open to publicized, meetings of other legislative bodies, or social or ceremonial occasions of the type that Commissioner Lujan, I think, mentioned. But again, the caveat to remember is that if there are a majority of you present at any one of these types of meetings or gatherings, you cannot discuss items of Planning Commission business. So recommendations for email. Avoid sending emails to the commission, the whole commission, and if necessary, provide information only and do not solicit responses. If you have to send emails to the whole body. When I send you emails, you will often notice that they are BCC'd to the body and not addressed on the regular line. I usually will include staff as well. When you reply to emails, be careful about communicating your position and be careful not to reply to a majority of the commission. That is why I usually send my emails by BCC, so that doesn't happen and you don't inadvertently reply to the majority. And I guess in general, as we all do, is, I know we all get volumes and volumes of email, but think carefully before pressing send, as the email can always be forwarded to a majority as well. So. Some requirements for meetings, and these are things that the staff make sure are required, but the Brown Act requires that agendas be published 72 hours in advance and be accessible to the public, be available on the city website, posted in certain areas called for under the city's regulations. Special meetings, agendas must be posted 24 hours in advance. Special meeting is usually called for a certain purpose. And it's limited to, a couple of agenda items, subject matters that in the chair's capacity or the chair's view may warrant a meeting that is taken place or that is scheduled outside of the regular cycle. But those require that agendas for those types of meetings are only required 24 hours in advance. Our agendas under the Brown Act have to contain a brief general description and an item for the item of business. Usually it can't exceed, or it shouldn't exceed 20 words. The standard is simply this: whether the public in reading the agenda would look at the agenda item and be able to discern or decide for themselves whether they wish to attend the meeting or provide input on that matter. So there should be enough information in any one agenda item to allow someone to make that decision. On occasion, it doesn't happen too frequently, but on occasion after an agenda is published, there may arise a need to agendize an item that wasn't originally on the agenda, and there is provision for that. There's a couple different scenarios where that can happen. If a majority determines that there's an emergency, like a public health or safety emergency that needs to be addressed, they can vote to agendize an item that wasn't originally scheduled. And then additionally, if there's a 2/3 vote by the commission that there is a need to take action on an item, and the need for the action on the item came to the attention of the body after the agenda was published, that's another way or a manner in which an agenda item can find its way onto an agenda, even when it wasn't originally published. That doesn't happen too frequently, by the way. On occasion it can, but it doesn't happen too frequently. And it really does have to be an emergency situation. There are some other exceptions to the commission's ability to take up and discuss non-agenda items. During public comment, for example, that's a time reserved for members of the public to make comment to the commission on agenda items and non-agenda items. Commissioners can briefly respond to public comments or questions and may provide a reference to members of the public to staff. As I know, Irma sometimes will direct applicants to see, a planner who's handling a project or someone who's got a question about a project, a member of the public. She may suggest or refer them to one of the planners on her team, to answer a specific question. But what I'm getting at is that public comment is not the time for two-way comment. It's really the time for the legislative body to intake and to hear those comments. Members can always ask questions for clarification and provide reference to staff when they need more information or if they feel they do. You certainly can report on your own activities. There's a time reserved for that, as there was tonight, for you to make any public comments of your own. Oftentimes that consists of events you've attended or meetings you've taken or people you've met with. You can request the staff to report back on any matter. And the last one is hidden, but you can make a request to place a matter on a future agenda if you'd like. And those typically are all fall into the category of non-agenda items, but there are still things that the commissioners can, comments and things that commissioners can do without violating the Brown Act. So I can tell you the Brown Act, while it definitely, and I think in a very positive way, establishes, foundations and parameters for business of the public to be conducted in the public, it also permits a good degree of flexibility, I think, as we've seen tonight with some of these exceptions. There's two types of public participation the Brown Act requires. One are the public comment periods, which we have in every one of our meetings, as we did tonight. And the general audience can make that public comment. The comments pertaining to agenda items, non-agenda items, the general rule is that the public comment has to pertain to an agenda item or an item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body. So that could be a general land use matter, for example, a general land use matter. The comments pertaining to agenda items are typically heard prior to the consideration of the item so that the commissioners can take those comments into consideration in their own discussion. Closed sessions, oftentimes they're not a regular feature of Planning Commission, but just for sake of completeness, I've added a slide here. Closed sessions are one of the very few exceptions to the Brown Act where business can be conducted outside of the public. You'll see them in city council meetings. They take place an hour before the council meetings, and the legislative body is authorized to meet in closed session outside of the view of the public to talk about certain more sensitive matters. Oftentimes it involves litigation, personnel matters, conference with real estate negotiators. There's a very, very finite number of subjects on which the legislative body can meet outside of the public. And even then, actions taken on some of those items must be disclosable or reportable to the public afterwards. I just added a few words about social media only because it is so pervasive. All those things are things I'm sure you've heard before. The internet never forgets. Perception is reality. The one I would focus on a bit is the last one, and that's online conduct can be used as evidence in litigation. As a city's lawyer, that is important to me, only because things said online and done online can and do pop up in litigation. That's not to say this is not an admonishment about saying anything or not saying any one thing, but I would ask you to be sensitive to that, only because that is used in the litigation process, things that are discovered online or things that are said online. Social media, some initial observations. The city's got an interest and an expectation in what is spoken on behalf of the city on social media sites, and those are controlled by the city. The city can control what it wants to say without violating any, say, First Amendment principles. For other sites, if you're posting and speaking about matters affecting the city, if you identify yourself as a planning commissioner, I always recommend, I think it's important that the opinions that you may or may not be expressing are your own and not the city's or the commission's as a whole. You can use your social media to answer questions, provide information to the public, or solicit information from the public. But what you cannot do is use social media to discuss business items among yourselves. And that includes, I added a parentheses there, the use of emojis and digital icons. And that concludes the presentation. Certainly congratulations on all your continuing and new appointments to the commission. It's my privilege to work with the commission to advise it on legal matters, staff as well. The Planning Commission, I think, serves among the most important roles here at the city because land use is one of the paramount features of municipal government, and the Planning Commission is really the nerve center of that. So thank you for your time and attention, and if you do have any questions or comments, I'm happy to address them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Funk. Do any commissioners have any questions?
I was thinking about it before too, when this was coming in the agenda. Obviously, the Brown Act's been around for a long time, and it's very crucial to local government to keep the, communication transparent, if you will. But what is the penalty for a Brown Act violation? Isn't it just that whatever you voted on gets reversed and brought up or something, and whatever? Because I recall, this was a couple of years ago though, because we've always had to take these classes and everything else for many years, that there's really never been anybody prosecuted besides a misdemeanor for a Brown Act violation. That's got to be pretty egregious kind of thing. But from our standpoint, not that we're going to or ever would, but basically it gets reversed, right? Isn't that the main penalty for a Brown Act violation? Whatever we voted on that we had prior commentary. So tomorrow we talk about things that are going to be next week at the corner of Lakewood and Firestone, and we agree on that. And then we say, hey, Carrie Masuva this and Mr. Lujan on there, whatever. So next Tuesday we vote on this on the corner of Firestone and Lakewood, and we violated it, and somehow it comes back. Doesn't it just get reversed, what we voted on?
That is one possible scenario.
Okay.
What I can tell you in general is that Brown Act contains no enforcement mechanism per se.
Right, that's what I thought.
But in practice, what typically happens
Oh,
are
can you go on the microphone?
Sorry. The Brown Act contains no specific enforcement mechanism, but the one thing I can say that it does require that anyone raising a Brown Act violation do that to the city first before any lawsuit is commenced, and essentially give the city the opportunity to look into that to see if it reaches the conclusion that a Brown Act violation is likely to have occurred or not. If the city feels that it has, oftentimes what agencies will do is take that action again. To in conformance with the Brown Act, and essentially a chance to do it over, if you will.
Thank you.
But that is one possibility, yes. And you're correct too. Individual prosecutions are fairly rare, quite rare. So we find the best, guardian way to prevent Brown Act violations is by making people aware of what the Brown Act requires and training. That's what we tend to focus on.
Okay, great.
Anything else?
Anybody else?
I will say, it's not, it's in the realm of the Brown Act, or it's a close cousin maybe. But if you have any other questions about it, you're always welcome to contact me at any time. I'm here at the city. I have an email address. I'm happy to provide you with my phone number as well, my cell phone number. What I also do in relation to the Planning Commission is advise on conflicts of interest when they may arise as well. And that's, like I said, maybe a cousin of the Brown Act, not quite under that category, but that is another role I serve. So that's, and that wasn't on our agenda tonight to go into, but that is something else that does come up in another role I play. So.
Small request. Can you hear me now? Can we get a copy of that presentation?
Oh, of course.
I like to read a little bit more and deeply instead of just one time.
And I could also provide you a detailed publication that's considered, or at least there's many publications about the Brown Act, but there's a few that I think are a little more comprehensive and in my opinion, easier to follow. One in particular that I use, and I'm happy to provide you and anyone else a copy of that as well. And so, but we are really, I will just say, perhaps in conclusion, that we are blessed to have a staff that is extremely expert in the Brown Act and takes great care to make sure the Brown Act is, the procedural requisites are satisfied in terms of noticing our meetings and agendizing matters and whatnot. So, anyways, that's, we're grateful for that.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, City Attorney Funk, for
you're
your
welcome.
presentation.
Thank you for your time and attention.
Does the Community Development Director have any additional comments?
I don't, Chair. Thank you.
All right, then we are adjourned at 7:22. Thank you all for attending.